Welcome to part 2 of our workbench. Steve here. Today we're building the tops. We're using 3/4 inch MDF, and we're actually going to have 3 layers of it, so it's going to be a nice thickness. And you want your work table or workbench to be fairly heavy so it's not moving around when you're working. You know, if you just put one piece on there, you can do whatever you want, whatever top you want. If you want to build a real nice maple one, this is just kind of an inexpensive way of doing it. And the top layer, what we're going to do is we're going to screw it down. That way, when it gets all damaged, you unscrew it, put a new one on, good to go. So the most important thing is, we're going to start with 2 pieces exactly the size that we want for our tabletop, or our bench top. So I'm going 5 by 3, and then we're going to build everything from the bottom up. Basically, put the next layer on, and we're going to use a flush trim bit. So our bottom one has to be right on the money, and then our next one's going to be just a little bit bigger. If you try and cut everything all the same right off the bat, you really do end up fighting, and all you have to do is make a little mistake with your saw. Next thing you know it, the sides don't match up. So we're going to alleviate all those issues. Going to show you how to do it right. Alright, I think I've got this thing set up now. Just got some sawhorses, just using a skill saw. I don't have a fancy table saw or anything like that. We're just going to make our cuts and we'll sand the edges, make them look good. Time to start building the tops. We'll mount the vises, and we've got to build the bottom for this. So I've got the measurements already figured out what I need for this, and we're going to notch it. I'm going to hang it over maybe a little over 1/4 of an inch over top of here. We don't want it to go past the 2x2. But when you're building a structure like this, like a bottom, And you know, this one here we got enough height, but you got to make sure that the width, your total width, is not going to exceed this opening, because you're going to have to put it in on an angle to drop it in there. So we have about 34, and I'm only 31 and a half, so I'm able to put that bottom in. If you can't do that because everything's too low, then you'll have to split the bottom in half and have 2 halves. Which isn't a big deal, it's just not going to look as good. Alright, I'm all set up here. Got a little bit of marking out left to do, and I'm just going to use a skill saw, run her by hand. I think I can get her close enough. And we'll sand the edges up and make them look pretty. Alright, let's get started with it. Now we just finish the corners off with the jigsaw. Now I'm using a reverse tooth on this. So the tooth pushed down, so any chip out will be down on the bottom. They're a nice blade to have around. I like using them a lot. That fits pretty good. Happy with that. So there, that's our bottom. Now there are spots for it to screw into. Most people don't even bother, but you can do one of these. They're there if you want to screw it down. I'll probably tip it over before I get going too far and put a couple screws in it for sure. Now we can work on the top. Now, when we were cutting this out, we made sure that our measurements, we made one that was exactly what we wanted. The other ones are slightly bigger, because we're going to start out with a good one, mount the next one, and then we'll use a trim cut bit on the router to make it exactly the same as the bottom one. So the key is get this thing centered in here. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to clamp it down, and I'm actually going to put 2 screws in here, or a couple screws, just to hold this in. Find my clamps here. Looks good. Lines up rather nice. Now when you're building a woodworking table, or any table for that matter, the thicker the top that you have, the better off you are. You really want a nice heavy table to work with. You don't want it moving around on you. So I'm going to use, now this is 3x5. I bought 4 sheets of 4x8 MDF. And out of that, we're going to be able to put 3 layers on to give it a 2 1/4, and that's going to be awesome for thickness for a top. Now it's going to make for a heavy top, so I'm going to need some help to move it around, but that's okay. I'm just getting rid of some of the cooties here. So the whole idea on the second level, now this is that 4 foot chunk off the end. It's actually 49, somewhere around there, because it's always a little bigger. And I've cut it a little wider now, so that we can flush trim this. Basically this is going to get glued and screwed down. So now we just need to cut a couple for each end here. And we'll put those in, and then put our top on top of that. So these I just cut out of those 5 foot chunks that we had from the edge of the tops. Now we want a fairly tight fit because we want to glue it and then on the edge so you don't really notice anything. And if it needs to be tweaked a little bit, well, then you need to tweak it. And this side here looks like I could use a little bit off this middle here, and I'm just going to use my block plane for that. And so we got a little tighter joint here. And then we can screw this down, glue and screw it. Now I'm not going to screw everything down. I'll use some brads, but we're going to need a couple screws in here. And I'm going to use a 1 1/4 drywall screw. I like them for MDF because they're really aggressive. And a fine thread on a screw is just not a good thing for MDF. So what I'm going to have to do is we're going to have to pre-drill this next layer with 3/16 hole, and then countersink it a little bit. I got a countersink bit here. If you just took a screw like this without a shank on it and screwed it into here, that would never ever tighten up, and you end up getting a bulge. Don't want to do that. So we're going to pre-drill this, put a few screws in here, and we're going to screw it together. slack load of glue on here, but enough. Knock down some of the high spots here. And you just kind of want to wiggle it around a little bit. A couple marks here, so you know where to be. Just like that. Put a couple brads in there to hold her into place. Here you press down. Now we can screw her down. The brads just help it from moving around on you, and it does help because we're not going to put screws everywhere. And don't go spinning them out just until they're tight. There, now you just want to check for gaps. That looks pretty good. Right on. Oh, wouldn't have shut the door. Anyway, if you don't have, I'm really fortunate I've got some nice tools like this router here that's strong enough to, you know, do a flush cut. But you haven't got that, you can always build your table oversized. That way you don't have to worry about your cuts perfect And a skill saw, you can just cut whatever size you need and then just clean it up with the, with the sander. Now you got to be you got to be pretty good with a skill saw to do that. That way if I just make one really good cut, then I don't have to worry too much about it. I just, route it. Works good for me. So there is a different method if you don't have all the fancy tools. Alright, we're ready for the top. Now on your top, you got a couple of options here. This one lays down really, really nice. And, I could just put a couple brads in here, call her good. Because the whole idea is when you wear out the top, you pull this one off, put on another one. But I think, with a little bit more of an abusive environment, I think I'm just going to put just maybe 6 screws, and that's going to be it. So anytime they want to change the top, you can just pull that off, you're good to go. Alright, now I just got to decide where I want to put my 6 screws. Checking for any little high spots. I just blew her off, so we're good to go. Ouch! Whew. Pinch on that one. Said this MDF stuff was heavy. But I would imagine a nice maple top would be just as heavy. But this will be flatter. MDF is nice if you need something nice and flat. It works really, really good. Okay, make sure that we're overhanging everywhere. Now I'm just going to put a clamp on it. My luck it'll move or something like that. Ruin my day. My piece of MDF really lays flat on here. But if you had one that was, give her one of these, you may have to put your screws a little tighter to the edge and then just add a couple more. Now we could put some brads in here as well, but you're just holding down this top piece, keeping it as flat as you can as a work surface. And the more stuff we put into it, more nails, or if you put glue underneath it, then you can't remove it when it gets all wore out and all chewed up. And it will. Okay, let's router this up. Time to mount these vises. Now, this is a little carpenter's one here, or woodworking vise. Basically, it just, well, I guess we should put it on right. It goes like that. I just took it apart, so we're just going to mount this part. Now, you would think that you'd say, well, hey, why don't we just put a bolt all the way through and hold it together? But normally on these ones, I will screw it in with a really nice number 14 screw. Now the thinking is, if this ever came off with 4 of those on there, that would have to be fairly catastrophic. And if it did, all you have to do is to drill through and then bolt it on later. But if I can eliminate anything from getting caught up here, and this is in a school, and in schools, for some reason, kids, if they see a little hole or something, they like to fill it up with glue, and then it really makes it hard to deal with if it loosens up. That's just one thing. You probably won't fill them up with glue, but if you got 4 of these in there, that should be more than enough to hold that up. So we're just going to mark this, find a happy spot for it. Well, we're completely flush out here. I'm just going to move it in just a tiny, tiny bit. Keep it tight up against there. Yep. So what I'm going to do, I just don't want to blow right into it with these big screws. I want to put a pilot hole first. So through the metal, because we have the metal underneath here, I'm going to just drill straight up with the pilot, and then I'll go through the metal with a 1/4 inch drill bit. Not gonna mount this thing permanent. I want to put on a nice face on here, so we want to screw from the back side. And I will do this when I deliver it. But we'll put a screw in just to mount it. Best if I lay it on my back. Just like that. Looks pretty good. Like I said, I'll take this off and then mount it permanently and deliver it, get it all fixed up. Let's see how she looks here first though. Looks good on there. So what we're going to do is I'm going to round this over after. We'll take this off, get it all nice and finished, make it look pretty. Alright, I'm mounting this on these vises here. What you want to do is you're going to find its happy place. But the big thing with these, if you can, some you can't, you want to be able to put a piece in and you want to be able to clear the edge of your table. If this vise was over a bit more, then this would hit the table and you couldn't put a long piece past. And a lot of people mount their vises wrong and then can't use them. So that's going to work great. I'll mark it out and then I'm going to drill from the top. That way I can look and see if I get it as straight as I possibly can and get it straight down through the steel, and then we'll drill it back. I should be able to go straight through with the 3/8. We'll see. I'll make that decision when I get it all marked up. see it coming together. Now, the next one I'm gonna do, well, of course I gotta do two of them. The next one, I'm gonna have it on casters, and I wanna see how it feels when it's rolling, make sure that everything's perfect. But we'll get the right bolts for the vise, and I'll build a little, you know, some inner plates for that carpenter's vise there, the woodworking vise. This is awesome. So okay, next step, we're gonna clean up the edges with a sander, and then we're gonna round over the top just with an 1/8 inch round over bit on the router. We got her done, and it looks absolutely beautiful. Vices are mounted, everything's all nice and tight. Time for delivery. I just hope it's not going to rain on me here. This has been a great project. Now, you might think this is overkill, but it's not. You want something that's fairly heavy. You want a surface that is not going to move on you. It's perfectly made for woodworking. If you want a welding bench, all you have to do is basically skin this with some 1/4 inch, and you would have a bench that you can hammer on all day long. It'd be perfect. And you know, it's as inexpensive as you can get when you get to a real quality piece. So works for me. I want this table to be in the school for 30-40 years, and that's my intention, and I think it's going to be there. Simple. You can just undo this top when it gets wrecked, put a new one on. Not hard to do. Don't be afraid to take this one on. If you want a good quality bench, have at her. Till next time.